Hey, welcome to All Things Baseball Podcast. This is episode 7. We're really excited about it. It's about the Little League World Series. Cue the intro music. Hey, welcome back to All Things Baseball Podcast. We're talking about the Little League World Series. It's going on right now. You know, just before we get into this, if you could like and subscribe, it really helps us grow the channel. We appreciate it. So, Little League World Series.
Yep.
You played Little League, right? You enjoyed it.
You did too, yeah. Way back when.
Way back when I did. I can't remember back that far. But, this is a real, we're purists for baseball. So, what's more pure than Little League World Series?
It's the best.
It is the best.
Yeah.
I thought might be a good place to start is maybe just talking a little bit about the history of Little League World Series for people who may not know. Started in 1947 in Williamsport. They actually play on the same field. I think it's called Origin Field. It grew 1950 to like the 48 continental United States, and then they started adding international. Did you know in the 77 years, the U.S. team has won about half, and the international teams have won about half.
Oh, wow.
So it's pretty even.
Yeah.
Although it's interesting that they call it a World Series, but the U.S. hosts it, and they always get a team in.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, yeah, it's interesting how they split it up. So they have the U.S. bracket and the international bracket.
Right.
And so at the end, after they have their United States championship game, where it's the best U.S. teams play each other, and then the international bracket it's just the other side of the bracket. They have the two best international teams play each other for their championship game, and then the best of those teams play each other for...
Right.
Yeah.
It is more of a World Series than the actual Major League World Series, where it's just Major League teams in the U.S.
Right.
So I always found that funny that, World Baseball Classic is kind of a World Series.
Oh,
but it's interesting the way they do it. In terms of, again, the history, there are 37 U.S. champions across many states. California has won the most out of any state. They've won 8.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Texas has won 1 in 1966. They're in the Final Four now, as we know.
Looking to win their second one.
28 different countries compete. 2 million boys around the world compete in Little League baseball. And it's important to note that Little League has its own set of rules, and that they're very strict, or at least they're supposed to be, on what those rules are. We'll get into some of the rule changes in a minute. One thing of note, really important, I thought, was in the international side, there were 16,000 games across dozens of countries that were played in 45 days to get to the 20 teams that came to U.S. to play in the international bracket. That's incredible.
That's a lot of
45,000 games determined the final 20 teams. I said 16 because that's what it used to be,
right?
But they just expanded it. So I find that amazing. Florida has never won it. They're in the Final Four. We'll talk about them. Texas won it. Chinese Taipei. How do you say that?
I say Taipei. I think you said... How do you pronounce it?
Taipei?
Taipei.
I think I say it now.
You said okay, yeah.
I was saying TP or I don't know.
Yeah.
It's Taiwan.
Sorry.
I don't know if people. I don't know if people know that Chinese Taipei is actually Taiwan, but for whatever reasons they have to call it Chinese Taipei. But that is Taiwan.
Been really strong and sound.
Great baseball. But the biggest distinction, I think, for the Little League World Series, and I was just talking to my friend Chris about this, who has a son, Will, your age, who played, and they actually went to the States when you were 12. Now, maybe backtrack for a second. You played Little League Baseball. Why don't you tell people a little bit about when you played and when you stopped? Because you went to travel ball.
Well, I'm 25 now, so I played when I was 9 and 10.
A little bit of
10. I played T-ball, coach pitch, and kid pitch. Only 1 year kid pitch, and then I went on to travel ball. So I only got a taste of it, and what park ball was really like. I remember we would divide our teams up based on major league teams. Everybody knew the best teams in the park just based on the major league team name. That was the easiest way to,
the Yankees or the Cardinals.
Yeah. And it was, I remember it was the Cardinals and at the time Indians, who are now the major league teams, the Guardians. But it was those two teams that they were the powerhouses. I believe we were the We weren't the Astros.
We were the Yankees.
We were the Yankees.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds about right.
We were the Smashers when we were coach pitch, but we were the
Right.
Yankees
Yeah.
when we were Little League.
Yeah, so it
like
changed over.
coach pitch, kid pitch. Excuse me.
Yeah, and what I remember was it was just very competitive. Like, it was bragging rights at school for, we were all zoned in for the same school, and there was always the bragging rights, and everybody wanted to beat, the best teams in the park to try to get to the championship game, and then make all-stars. All-stars was a big thing. It was the best kids in the park would get picked to play on.
And if you made all-stars, then you had a chance to play in the sectionals, and then the states, and then the regionals, and then Little League World Series. So just for people, that is kind of how that went. And my friend Chris, reminded me, because you didn't play, because you played travel ball, and it was too much to play both. He reminded me that had you played, they went down, they won their district. Won kind of the region, like they beat Eastern, and they beat, which is an area in our part of North Alabama, which is a very powerful team. So just to give you context, we had 200 kids that were in our little park area to choose 12 all-stars. Eastern had almost double that. Wow. And then by the time the 12-year-old team from our area, which Chris's son was on, went down to Mobile, Alabama to play in the States, they lost to a team that, I don't know if it was illegal or not, but he said in Mobile, the team drew from 3,000 players. And they've cut that to now no Little League team around the world can draw from more than 1,500 players, because that would be cheating.
Yeah, that's too much.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's just too many. I mean, you can pick the best kids. It's like if we had 3,000 people in our area to pick from for our little park, it would be like such a big advantage, because then we would just you'd pick the best players when you're choosing the all-star teams.
Right. So I think last year happened to be the year that a team from, I think it was from Maine, New York. I was looking it up, and it said Maine, and then it said New York, from the smallest. Like the thing I looked up was what is the smallest city or area that won the Little League World Series, and it happened to be apparently last year. They drew from a very small lot, kind of like ours. Yeah, makes it hard if you come from a small area and you're only drawing from 150 or 200 players. Definitely. It makes it hard to advance. So some of these larger teams, like in Texas and whatever, they're drawing from the maximum that they can. But Little League does regulate that.
Yeah, I think that's important to note. Like, for the smaller teams that are trying to get out and, win their state or their sectional, or first their district, it can be super hard. Whereas, like you said, a team from Texas or the small teams from wherever, Kentucky, Illinois, that don't have as many kids, it's almost impossible for them to break out and make it to
it is
at least get a chance to make it to the World Series.
Exactly. You'll recall when you were 12, there was a team in travel ball called the Georgia Bandits.
I remember
that was the best team in the country.
And that was travel ball, yeah.
And if they had ever, and they could draw from much larger, but they didn't. They were actually out of Ringgold, Georgia. But we had never seen a team like that. And they had guys throwing high 70s and 80s, like you see now with some of the best teams. They would have been a force if they were allowed. Yes. If they were a park ball team. And some teams that we know of, they would take their travel ball team and kind of have them still play park ball just to be eligible. But that's another podcast.
Yeah, well, probably. Yeah, I remember we made a decision to choose travel ball over park ball because of the time commitment. Park ball, I'm not speaking down,
which is Little League.
Yeah, it's just Little League.
Park
ball is Little League. It's your local park where you sign up, go play.
Everybody plays. Everybody gets to play.
Yeah.
A certain amount of time.
And so the competitive aspect, depending on your area, I felt like our park was competitive. But I wanted to see other teams from around the country and play against different types of competition. Right. So that was my reasoning.
For sure.
And I wasn't speaking down on park ball, because
not at all.
I think if I had the chance to, have more time to play park ball, Little League, I would have. And
definitely,
because you can. I think I stopped at AAA. They had it like classified as like when you start kid pitch, you start at AAA and then you advance to the majors, which is you get a little
That might have been just our park. I'm not sure that's a little league thing.
well, you get like
or not.
older, right? Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
it was just art.
Right. I
Yeah.
think it was. But we just wanted to give that distinction. Johnny played. I played a long time ago, but the rules have changed a little bit. But before we get into the biggest rule change, I thought it would be good to talk a little bit about the sportsmanship that Little League really promotes, right? And we got a lot. Hopefully, we'll have a lot of kids who listen to.
You don't see too many brawls in Little League.
No, you don't. Travel ball, you do.
Yeah.
Travel ball's a little crazy. I
I
could be wrong. Little League might be the same way. We've been a little bit out of the loop, but
yeah.
But they have a pledge. It's a Little League pledge. It was written in 1954. I looked up, and the kids are supposed to say it. It just really has to do with playing with honor, honoring your teammates and opponents, not arguing calls, being respectful. I find that is lacking a little bit.
Yes.
And when I watched some of the games of the recent World Series that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, these guys, they adhere to it.
You can see it for sure. I think I saw like maybe a couple clips where I'm not going to mention any team names for the respect of the kids playing, but you could see a couple of them getting frustrated or
for sure
that things weren't going their way, and you could also see when the games ended and when
they're emotional.
They're emotional, but you always see the other team try to pick them up, and
they really do. And it's to me that's the purity that you and I have really grown to love about baseball, is that sportsmanship is really an important part of the game, and it should be celebrated. It shouldn't be seen as weak. I think sometimes I run into a coach that if you're congratulating an opponent, it's like you should step on their throat and that type of mentality. And certainly you want to be fiercely competitive, but not at the expense of sportsmanship. So I wanted to mention that because they have a pledge. I don't know that ESPN does the greatest job of following players in the dugout when they strike out or that call. There's some really bad calls against them. I'm watching the games. Holy cow.
Yeah.
So I don't like it when they follow him in the dugout. I don't like it when they promote because they all do the beating of the chest when they hit a home run and a little bit too celebratory, but that's not necessarily
the flashiness
considered.
Trickles down.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But the sportsmanship's important. I think they've also chosen, like they chose Alex Rodriguez to announce some games last year, and he was a juicer and a liar. He lied many times about taking steroids. So I was like, why?
Not our favorite Yankee.
Not our favorite Yankee. So anyway, but I thought it would be important to just kind of mention the sportsmanship is a big part of the pledge, big part of what they're trying to promote with Little League.
Yeah. And I don't know if you caught this, and we're going to go into it a little bit too here in a second, but Todd Frazier was the announcer for some of these games this year, and he was a former Little League World Series player, which I thought was so cool.
Yes, I did not know that he announced. What year was that?
This year, Todd.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
With Carl Ravitch and that team of guys?
Believe so, yeah. Yeah, he was doing some of the games that I was watching. He did Venezuela versus Japan.
Okay.
And I want to say Southeast versus Southwest.
Right.
Which is Texas versus Florida.
Well, let's segue into the other major league players that have played, notable ones, before we get into the rule changes. So I know Boog Powell, you don't know him. He was an Oriole in the 60s. He played in 54.
Hey, some of these you're going to say, I'm going to be like,
you're not going
right
to know.
Over my head.
Carney Langsford played in the 60s in Little League. He played major leagues in the 70s. Charlie Hayes was a Yankee. Gary Sheffield, you'll know.
Oh, yeah.
He was a Yankee. He played in the 80s.
The Waggle,
in Little League. Jason Varitek, Boo, is a Red Sox.
Yeah.
He played in the 90s. Lance Lynn, Jurickson Profar, Jonathan
Scope.
You sure of that?
It's not Shoop. It looks like...
I say Shoop.
Well,
and I'm wrong because you always correct me.
My buddy Briggs, he's a Tigers fan.
Yeah.
He played for the Tigers. I think he still does.
Yeah.
It's spelled Schoop, but when I said Shoop, he goes, no, Scope. I was
Scope.
Like, it looks nothing like Scope. I don't know how.
We need to call him and change his name.
Okay.
Cody Bellinger, one of your favorite players.
Yeah, I love watching Cody.
Yeah, he played, and he's still playing now.
Yeah, MVP, Comeback Player of the Year.
For sure.
Everybody should know his story.
Nick Prado, who's playing now,
Royals,
and Sedane
Rafaela.
The
Red Sox.
The Red Sox.
Unfortunately.
So, a couple other things to note. They do a home run derby, kind of like the major leagues. That's going on tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're watching this, It's actually happening tonight, but they're going to air it tomorrow on ESPN,
Right.
the 23rd. I've never seen one. I've always just watched kind of the games, the highlights, and then usually the championship of the U.S. and the championship of the international, and then the overall championship.
Right.
But since we're doing this podcast, you and I have taken more of an interest.
Yeah.
We have the app.
Yeah, we downloaded the app. We can follow all the teams that we're interested in seeing, especially
Right.
Southeast. We always root for them. That's our neck of the woods, so we like seeing
Right.
our guys perform well, which Southeast is in the U.S. Championship game. They're going to play Southwest on Saturday, I believe. So,
They are. It is Saturday, yeah. And Southeast is Florida, and Southwest is Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So remember, we mentioned earlier that you go from kind of your city to the district to the states to the regionals. Like Alabama would play like Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, and maybe one other.
Yeah, they have a tournament.
That was the regional, and then if you won that, then you would be one of the 20 that would go to the World Series. Just to give you context,
represent your area.
So rule changes. So there's a major rule change. I want to mention it for people who maybe just starting to get into the Little League World Series now, because this is Final Four type. Continuous lineup. It used to be, and you remember this because I coached it, and it's hard.
Yeah.
The rule was that everybody had to get one at bat in a game and 2 defensive innings. So you were, no matter what if you had 10 people on your team, which is the minimum in this, the World Series right now, or you had 13, you had to get everybody in at bat, and you had to get everybody 2 defensive innings in the lineup. And now they just decided that takes too much time with the substitutions. I guess ESPN it feels like ESPN directed this because they televised the games.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Well, I think they want to see more people out there, more kids come through and seeing, I think it's an interesting thing I mentioned how it is the only place you'll ever see it for a sporting event, at least from what I've seen, is the favorite hobby, favorite sport thing.
Yeah, that's a good job by ESPN.
How tall and small some of these kids are. Yeah. You get to see so many different
I saw a 4'10",
kids.
95-pound kid from
I saw him.
Chinese Taipei.
Long hair, the catcher?
Yeah. Oh, yes. There was one from Nevada who was also tiny.
Yes.
That's who you may be thinking about, the long hair. No, you're right.
With the catcher one, he had the cannon.
Unbelievable. 4'10", 95 pounds.
He's a baller.
Yeah.
He was
long hair.
Amazing.
He was amazing, and he was unique. I like the fact that he was different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he, not just small, but long hair. He had a flair to him, but he wasn't, too showy. We liked him quite a bit.
Anybody can play this game. That's
but the
great.
continuous lineup, batting the lineup changes. A lot of coaches hate it. I was looking at an interview of one of the coaches in Little League. His team got bounced in California. Yeah. In like the Los Angeles area. And he had a strong team, 1 through 6 or 7. And so, but he had 12 kids in his team, and his bottom 7 through 12 didn't hit well.
Yeah.
So he's like, if we had done it the old way, we would have won. But, I don't know what to say about that. It's televised now. It's a big deal. The continuous lineup is a major change. Yeah. It is easier on the coaches that aren't too swift. Like, it's so easy to fill out your lineup. We used to have to think about, okay, we've got to get these kids in. When do we get them in? How long is this game going to go? Because they're usually, they're not in the Little League World Series time limit, but in ours, they were, I think, time limit because it was, you're trying to get so many games in.
Right.
Anyway, it's just an interesting major difference in the most recent rule changes.
Yeah, you're carrying extra hitters. You may not necessarily need at the moment when you have a continuous lineup.
And you had a good point about what it also affects.
The pitching.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to have the 2 or 3 extra hitters, maybe the 10 through 12.
Right.
And you wanted to use 1 or 2 of pitching that game, it kind of conflicts it a little bit. Now they're an extra hitter.
Right.
You can't go out and put them as a pitcher right now in this game, so you have to hold them off.
Right.
Or maybe put him as a right fielder, and maybe he doesn't play right field, and then bring him in for pitcher, because that's usually how it works. So if nobody's sitting, I mean, I don't really agree with it. I don't understand it, but
it's different.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about where we are right now. So we got 4 teams left. The teams are
Southwest versus Southeast will play in their U.S. Championship game.
Saturday.
And by the time this airs, it should be done, but that's what it's looking like right now. And
That's a good distinction.
Yeah.
We're recording this on the Thursday night, and this podcast will come out on Tuesday. So we'll have known after this who won. So you're going to hear our predictions. So so it's Texas, which is Southwest versus Florida Southeast, and then International is Chinese
Taipei and Venezuela.
Yeah, they're in. So you and I have been watching the games and the highlights, and I'm just so impressed with all these teams.
Yeah.
The Chinese Taipei team. I did it again. They're very disciplined.
Yes.
They 1 through 12 can bunt. I think they bat 12. I could be mistaken.
Very efficient.
They all have step loads, so they're all loading early and waiting because these guys are throwing from 46 feet.
They have variations of the one-legged hitting.
Yeah.
You can kind of see it.
Yeah. So they all have flat bats, flat swings, and they're trying to time it early. Like they're literally trying to get their foot down as early as possible because from 46 feet, it's almost unfair how hard these guys throw. Yeah. Flat bats, I look at that aspect of it.
Yeah.
So Chinese Taipei, their catchers are elite in framing. I think
they know to go with the ball at all times.
Right. And they had that one kid, I think, who threw – was he the guy who threw 80 miles an hour, or was it the kid from Texas?
No, I think that was Texas.
Okay.
Texas or Venezuela.
Well, the Venezuelan kid is the best player in the tournament, in my opinion. His name is Luis Yepes. He's a shortstop and a pitcher. He just hit a bomb tonight. He made a play on a relay, got a guy home. I mean, he must have thrown it 85 miles an hour. And the catcher had no problem.
He's got a cannon, yeah. And the catch is elite too.
Had no problem. So he's my favorite player in the tournament, Luis Yepes. I wrote it down phonetically, which is good for me. But, I would say my favorite shortstop, even though he was the shortstop, was probably Ozawa from Japan. Yeah. He was an absolute vacuum. There was a second baseman who was 4'11", about 105 pounds I think he's for Venezuela. Well, maybe the Caribbean team, but I think Venezuela. And we'll see when we watch the championships. He was a vacuum at second, but he's just smaller. He didn't have the range. But Ozawa was my favorite shortstop, even though Yepes is my favorite overall player. Ozawa was amazing. But just down and through the lineup, those two teams are very disciplined. Yes. I would say Venezuela has bigger hitters, but would you say Chinese Taipei has maybe deeper?
Yes, and they are able to do more, I think. They use the small ball.
Right.
They like to bunt guys around.
They do. They
pass the baton, as we like to call it, when you're just trying to do a job at your at bat. And it looks like they matured so early for their age to play at that level. Like, I wanted to ask you, of all these kids that are in the championship games, I mean, what percentage would it be a problem for them to transfer to the bigger field? Because right now they're playing on the Little League field, and they're going to make the jump next year to the big field, which
is the equalizer. What percentage? I would say every team that I saw had some guys that were 5'8", 165, 175 pounds.
So maybe it'd be a little harder for them.
But a lot of the smaller guys, they would struggle. Even though they're very skilled, they just don't have the size.
But I think fundamentally, I think it's a lot of those skills will transfer over to the bigger field. But I mean, how efficient they are and how hard some of these kids throw and the range they have, I don't think it would be too much of a problem. Of course, you got the little ones that may struggle a little bit. But I think that was interesting. Also, another thing I noticed was, I don't know if you saw it, a lot of the kids were chasing high pitches and a lot of pop flies and a lot of flyouts. And when the discipline wasn't there, when they weren't, passing the baton down to the next guy, it was usually they were chasing high pitches, which I found interesting. So that's the discipline for that. I think, once they learn that, that's the only thing I think they would need to transfer to the big field is seeing the ball longer, which would help.
True.
But I wanted to mention from Chinese Taipei, there was this pitcher, Li Shang-shi.
Yeah.
He throws in the high 70s, has like a wipeout curveball.
Yeah.
It looks like it's got like a 8-inch break vertically,
Yeah.
which is amazing
From
for that
46
age.
feet,
Yes.
yeah.
Which, we teach our kids in baseball, like, if you can trust your arm and the spin of the ball when you're learning a curveball or a slurve,
Mm-hmm.
You just looking to aim and hit a spot. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you just want to trust it and have confidence in the pitch. But these guys, they look like they can break it off at any time and work backwards and at any point get the hitters out. So I thought that was pretty interesting. He just looked very strong,
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
very confident, and
watch out for him. Do you
yeah,
notice that they all crowd the plate?
they do. A
They're
lot of them
all
do.
on top
Yeah.
of the plate, which is incredible because they're throwing 75 miles an hour from
Yeah.
46 feet.
It is crazy.
What about Florida and Texas?
Yeah, so as we're wrapping things up, I just want to do a little update on Little League World Series. So my predictions are going to be Texas beats Florida, Southwest beats Southeast.
You like that number 12 kid from Texas?
I do.
Tell me about him.
Yeah, number 12 from
Hurst,
Texas.
right?
I believe it was Hurst.
Julian.
He had an interesting last name. Big hitter. He swings it well. He looks disciplined at the plate. He can throw, I think, in the low 70s, I believe, and has a good changeup, curveball.
Yep.
Able to locate well. Doesn't get too rattled, it looked like. So I think he'd be their number one go-to and have somebody filling at shortstop. So, yeah, I'd go with Texas over Southeast and then Chinese Taipei over Venezuela. I think you liked.
I like Venezuela,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't be surprised if Chinese Taipei won. I'm going with Venezuela and Texas in the championship, and then Venezuela over Texas to win it all. Who do you like?
I'll go Texas over Chinese Taipei.
You go Texas over Chinese Taipei? You're a good.
You got to win. 1966 was the last time they won it, right? You said earlier.
Texas, yes, I did.
Yeah, okay. So
good.
Let's bring it back to the States.
Let's bring it back to the States.
But I think we're going to wrap it up here.
Yeah.
This is episode 7. Going over the Little League World Series. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. It helps out a lot. Thank you.